In our first live session, we thought about which accents and dialects we and others like and don't like, and tried to think about the reasons why. We realised that the reasons are often, or even usually, not to do with anything natural. They're to do with what we associate that accent with. So, for example, back in the 1970s, 80s and 90s, Northern Ireland accents used to be rated very low when people were surveyed about what they thought about different accents. Now we come out top of lots of the lists. What changed? How Northern Irish people speak hasn't changed, or only very slightly, so it must be to do with something else. Well, back in the 70s, 80s and 90s, the vast majority of Northern Irish accents heard on the news were in negative stories about the conflict. Then the peace process began, and some Northern Irish actors such as Liam Neeson and James Nesbitt and later James Dornan became more high profile and even played lead romantic hero roles, and Northern Irish accents became a lot more cool and sexy. There's a chicken and egg aspect to it, I think. During the conflict, it was a bit of a risk to try to cast a Northern Irish person as a lead role, given what people might associate with the accent, so it became easier to do so after the conflict ended. The flip side is that the more these accents were heard in these contexts, the more the associations changed and the attitudes towards the Northern Irish accent improved. So, what are we doing when we make these non-natural associations with accents or with other languages? We're stereotyping. It's important not to immediately feel bad or make others feel bad about stereotyping, though. We should think about the road to a stereotype as a series of steps, and it's only the final step that's problematic. In essence, stereotyping is about categorization, and it is necessary for us to categorize things to make sense of the world around us. I once experienced a very young child who lived in the city looking at a sheep and saying, "Woof." That's pretty funny, right? But it's also a nice illustration of what I'm getting at about categorization. The child did not know what a sheep was. She had never seen a sheep. So she did quite an intelligent thing. She thought to herself, "I know that's an animal. It is furry and has 4 legs. Maybe it's a dog." She was categorizing this new animal in a way that made sense to her. As we grow up and have more and more experiences in more and more contexts, our categorizing skills develop considerably, of course. It's part of how we learn how to use or react to different things, and it's part of how we learn to keep safe and behave appropriately in life. All good so far, but stereotypes go one step further. In addition to categorizing something, they evaluate it, and it's the evaluation part that's problematic. For example, we meet someone for the first time. We decide that they are different from us in some way. They might look different, sound different, or behave differently from us. We therefore place them in a different category to ourselves, even though in many senses, such as being a human being or perhaps being the same gender or a similar age to us, we could place them in the same category as ourselves. The key thing is whether we see the difference as positive, negative, or neutral. If we make a positive or negative evaluation, we will likely be basing it on prior experience. Sometimes a negative evaluation will simply arise from something or someone being unknown to us. But often we base our evaluation fairly or unfairly on experience. For example, have we met someone with that trait before who did something good or bad for us, or who we saw do something good or bad for someone else? What we're doing is generalizing from a specific case. We're saying, "I once saw a person with blue hair give up their seat on a bus for someone who needed it more. Therefore, this new person with blue hair, who I have just met, will be similarly empathetic and kind. Let's hope they will be, but couldn't the empathy and kindness of the person you've just met with blue hair, or couldn't the empathy and kindness of the other person with blue hair have been related to any one of their other identity traits rather than their possession of blue hair? And did you see the first person with blue hair in real life or via the media? If it was via the media, was there a conscious decision to cast a person with blue hair in that role? Did the news team decide that it was more newsworthy to run a story about a person with blue hair giving up their seat rather than a person with pink hair? Or did the person sharing the social media post choose to focus on the person with blue hair because their best friend has blue hair? And all of that is before we even get into the fact that no one has blue hair naturally. You get the idea. There are a whole range of intertwined reasons why people hold stereotypes about other people. They're sometimes to do with our own experiences. They're sometimes to do with other people's choices. They're sometimes to do with the media. They're not always negative, as we've seen from the development of positive associations with people with blue hair. And let's consider stereotyping more seriously in relation to national and ethnic identity now. We've talked about how we can stereotype based on the language that a person uses, which tends to happen because of the contexts we have heard that language in. Now we're going to think about how a choice of word or image can encourage us to stereotype a person or a group of people in a certain way. Another way to put this is that the choice of word or image can construct a person or a group of people as something, whereas a different word or image might construct them as something different. Consider the following 4 images that were used in news coverage of people in Niger experiencing a food crisis situation. Think about whether each one reinforces or challenges the stereotypes we tend to hold about people in the developing world. Think about what is in the pictures, but also what is not in them, what is absent from them that we might expect to be present. Do you think that some of these pictures were more stereotypical than others? Just pause the video on one of the images if you want to consider it for a bit longer, or jump back and forth if you want to consider the similarities and differences again. People tend to consider the first 2 pictures to construct the people in a different way from the second 2 pictures. Do you agree? In the first 2 pictures, 2 key choices have been made. Firstly, a picture of a young child has been chosen over a picture of an adult. And secondly, a young child in need of help has been chosen, or the picture has been taken at a point at which the young child is more in need. Both choices have an emotive effect on us as an audience, don't they? We feel empathy for the children in the pictures, and we may want to do something for them. Think further then about the relationship this sets up between us as an audience and the young children in the pictures. They cannot do something, so we want to do it for them. In theoretical terms, they are passive and we are active. We could take this beyond a relationship between the individual audience member and the child in the picture. Given that these types of images tend to be the norm for images of developing countries that are displayed in the media of developed countries, could we also say that this choice is constructing a relationship between the developed world and the developing world, making one active and the other passive, suggesting that representatives of the developed world need to come in and fix the problems of the developing world? Bearing this in mind, consider the second picture. It is also a picture of a young child in need. But look more closely. The child has a caregiver who is feeding them, but this person has been cropped out of the picture. In relation to the points we've been thinking about activity and passivity, think about the effect the cropping has. The caregiver is doing something active to help the child, but this has been removed from the picture that is shown to us as an audience. Therefore, the activity has been removed and we are left with the passivity of the child, and by extension the assumption that, again, the developed world needs to come in and fix the problem. That could be considered to be pretty disempowering, albeit symbolically, for the people in the community, couldn't it? Now, think about how the third and fourth pictures contrast with the first and second pictures in terms of how they construct the situation. The third picture shows a group of people working in a field. Their job looks very challenging given the famine situation, but nonetheless they are active, they are working hard to deal with the situation in which they find themselves. Likewise, the fourth picture. It is arguably the most empowering because it shows a community of people gathered together. We do not know what they're doing, but our reading of the image might be, for example, that they are gathered together at a community meeting to discuss and plan strategies to deal with the situation in which they find themselves. Think about these differences the next time you see any media coverage of or charity advertising about a situation in a developing country. Think about who is active and who is passive. It can be a difficult call, especially in a charity context, because part of the point of a charity is to raise funds to enable people in need. Do you think you would be more inclined to donate to a charity that used a picture of the type of the first two pictures or a picture of a type of the second two pictures? We might like to think we would like to be shown people being enabled to help themselves, but perhaps we feel more emotive about the poor little powerless child. If we do, that probably tells us something even bigger about all of the media we have consumed about such a situation. And think about the importance of the genre or the type of media the words or images are appearing in. For example, whilst we can expect advertising, for example charity advertising, to try to persuade us, we expect to consume facts from news. So adverts should adhere to ethical standards, and news arguably shouldn't put any colour or spin on their words or images. But it's vitally important to remember that even in factual genres, construction still happens. It is actually impossible to communicate at all without making choices, without constructing people and events in a certain way. Think about something as simple as meeting your friends for a coffee and catching up on what each of you has been up to. The stories you tell each other involve choices of what to highlight and what to say less about, the words to choose and the images to conjure. It's not that you're trying to lie to your friends, of course you're not, but you might be trying to have some effect, to make them laugh, to help them remember something from the past, and so on. These choices are even starker when it comes to social media, and we'll think more about that in future videos. News stories, like any story, also involve choices. And it's as important to remember that when consuming them or sharing them as it is for the journalist to consider it when writing them. So far, we've considered stereotypes that relate to social class, national identity and ethnicity. Many other aspects of identity can be stereotyped too, for example, gender, disability and sexual orientation, and we'll think more about these in future weeks' videos. See you in the next video.